Welcome to the Federal Retirement Podcast. My name is David Rates from Benchmark Financial Group, and every month we discuss important topics regarding the retirement planning process for federal employees. This Lunch and Learn series is an interactive discussion where individuals can ask questions. To join these discussions live, you may register by joining our email list at bfgkc.com. We also provide in-person retirement planning and benefit education to federal employees. To learn more about these seminars or to schedule a seminar at your federal agency, go to our website at bfgkc.com and click on seminars. Additionally, if you're looking for assistance to get your retirement on the right track, set up an appointment with us today. You can schedule an appointment online by visiting our website at bfgkc.com or email me at david.rates@bfgkc.com. The contact information is also listed in the description. By setting up a complimentary consultation, we can review your financial situation and develop a plan to meet your financial goals. We hope you enjoyed this topic and hope to connect with you soon.
Well, thanks for tuning into this month's call, everyone. Seems like it's that time of the year that we've had a number of clients that are getting their ducks in the row for end of the year retirement, and several folks that took buyout offers that have a looming retirement date here in a few days. So we thought it'd be worthwhile to just touch on some of the key points to be aware of and some of the important identifying items of information to be aware of, just navigating the waters of the formal retirement process with HR and working with OPM. So like Patty said, feel free to chime in with any questions and we'll get going. Alrighty, so in terms of like the 1,000 foot up process at a glance, obviously numero uno on the list is zero in on a retirement date, which we'll elaborate on here in a second. You want to notify your agency, usually giving them enough lead time, 6 to 12 months out. Next on the list would be submitting the formal applications or the paperwork for retirement. Usually HR wants those about 90 days out, but that one just kind of depends on their personal preference. So that would be one to just double check with point of contact at HR if at all possible. Next on the list is OPM intake or OPM. Inevitably, your final paycheck and annual leave are the last payments that you get from your agency, and then all of your records are shifted to the Office of Personnel Management. So there's a process that takes place where you're getting set up in the system with the Office of Personnel Management in terms of intake. And then once you get set up in the system, get your civil service annuitant number, there's a whole processing time that takes place where OPM is essentially crunching the numbers and verifying and auditing your service history to come up with final payment amounts for your different pension benefits, first supplemental payments, just all the different pieces of the pie. And then that process usually takes about 2-3 months in a normal time frame, sometimes longer, depending on how colorful your service history is. But eventually, you'll get this My Benefits book. It's kind of a small booklet size, but you just bank in the back of your mind. It's the one that has the blue cover and it says your federal retirement benefits. This specific book comes from OPM once they've finalized everything, and it just breaks down final numbers for each piece of the pie for your finalized benefits. So final payment amounts for your first pension, final coverage amounts for what you decided to keep with your federal employee group life insurance, final payment amounts for the first supplement, choices for FEHB, and on down the list. So it's an important piece of identifying information. Keep it in a safe place if at all possible. In terms of just getting familiar with the choices that you have to make, because inevitably you've got these benefits, but there's decisions that need to be made for what you want to do for each one of these benefits. So first, pension would be right there at the top of the list. In terms of knowing the pension amount and different surviving spouse options, whether or not you want to go with the maximum survivor benefit from the federal government, whether or not you want to go with the partial survivor benefit from the federal government, or whether or not you want to go with no survivor benefit. TSP, obviously, setting up an income strategy would be an important line item on the list. Staying up to date with how the money is invested relative to the timing of your retirement, knowing what your distribution options are and the timing of when you can access TSP savings for distribution. First supplement, if you're in a spot where you've retired on an unreduced retirement and you're getting the first supplemental payment, it's always good to know what that payment amount is. Usually people are pretty curious about how much money they can make because there's an earnings test that's applied. And just knowing the different payment amounts between the first supplemental benefit relative to what you'd be looking at once you hypothetically switch over to Social Security at age 62. And then specifically referencing Social Security, when to turn it on, whether or not it makes sense to turn it on sooner as opposed to later, or ASAP at age 62, or whether or not you wait until full retirement age, or whether or not you wait until 70 to max out the benefits. So checking your eligibility is an important one too. Sometimes there's this discrepancy between your service computation date for leave and your service comp date for retirement. Service comp date for leave is kind of like a catch-all for every piece of time that could hypothetically be credited towards your retirement pension calculation. Service comp date for retirement is actually the date that they use to calculate your pension benefit. So the reason I bring this up, a couple of years back, we ran into a scenario where we were talking to somebody. When she first got hired on from the federal government, she was working as a FICA or a part-time employee for the first year-ish. So her service comp date for leave when she was retiring reflected 30 years of service, but her actual service comp date for retirement was based off of 29 years. And relative to the timing of when she was looking to retire, she could have retired at that 29-year mark, but retiring 1 year prior to getting to that 30-year threshold would have meant that she would have taken a reduction in her pension, a permanent reduction in her pension, and she wouldn't have been eligible for the first supplement. So just knowing the difference between those different dates can make a big difference hypothetically in retirement benefits going forward in terms of the timing of things. And then documentation on any breaks in service. Usually military time is a big one here, just making sure that you have the correct DD-214, the receipt for the military time, and making sure that it's been calculated into your service computation date. So, and then it always helps if you can get your hands on a retirement estimate. So this would be a snapshot of just a general estimate that you can get from HR. Obviously, you want to verify service comp date, like we said a second ago. Check the high 3 number, because the pension amount is all one of the major variables of the pension amount that they're showing here is the number that they use for your high 3 calculation. And that one changes based on the timing of when you're planning to retire. So sometimes those estimates will have your current salary listed for the high 3. So depending on if you're planning to retire like ASAP or a year or two into the future, it's always good to take into consideration any forward projections in that HR or that high 3 number. And then zeroing in on a retirement date. Sometimes people want to run a few different scenarios, whether or not the retiring mid-year or at the end of December makes the most sense for them. And then verifying just the payment amounts for survivor benefits and the cost of those different benefits are always important. And those are right on the front page of these estimates. So moving on. Best retire. Usually 12/31 or December 31st is the most popular date for a lot of folks. The main reason for that is, in theory, most people can carry over 240 hours of annual leave from one year to the next. So let's say in theory that last year of employment, you strategically save as much annual leave as possible. Hypothetically, if your retirement date is 12/31, you carried over 240 hours and then you didn't use any of them that you'd accumulated throughout the course of the year. You could cash out with 448 hours of annual leave. And then there wouldn't be any delay in your first pension getting processed, but that leave payment would come in the following tax year. So like if you're going out 12/31/2025, your payment for annual leave would be paid to your taxable income to you in the 2026 tax year, and you don't lose the time that you accumulated throughout the course of the last year of employment. So 12/31 is a big one, but sometimes if leave isn't as big of a piece of the pie, sometimes people want to retire mid-year or a few months prior to going into the holiday season. So just knowing the differences and then how you can maximize that leave payment sometimes plays a bigger role in the actual date that you finally go with for a formal retirement date. In terms of submitting everything or giving HR a heads up about it, submitting forms to HR is right up there at the top. Usually HR wants these about 90 days out, but it's good to double check with an HR point of contact if at all possible, because sometimes they'll want them 60 days out or 30 days out. We had a client who was trying to be proactive and submitted hers 90 days out one time, and then by the time her actual formal retirement date hit, they hadn't gotten to processing. It was like on a stack on somebody's desk, and she actually got a normal paycheck. That caused a whole headache because then she had to go pay that money back and just unravel that yarn ball. So making sure that you have all the correct identifying information with HR is important. OPM backlog, knowing that there's different processing times relative to the different timeframes for retirement. End of the year is usually a bottleneck of a lot of folks. So you kind of bank if you're zeroing in on retiring at the end of the year. On the one hand, it's great to maximize your leave payment, but you kind of package into it that there could be a little bit of an extended delay because there's a lot of folks that zero in on the end of the year for retirement date. And in a nutshell, the earlier you submit the paperwork, the less chance there is of a delay, assuming that all the identifying information was filled out correctly. So this would be us in terms of the paperwork. SF 3107 is the main retirement application for FERS employees, and this would be a snapshot of the first page of just what that document looks like. SF 2801 would be a CSRS application for immediate retirement. Items to include with your formal SF 3107 or SF 2801, notarized spouse's content to survivor. So if you opt for any survivor option less than the maximum, which is 50%, you got to get a notarized form and have your spouse's signature on that. So just kind of bank that one in the back of your mind. If you're in a spot where you have a divorce decree or a court order available for processing, you definitely want to submit that prior to the formal retirement date. So OPM has enough time to digest that information, so you're not waiting in limbo land for an extended period of time to get your final pension check out to you. Copy your marriage certificate, receipt of any buyback time or documentation of any buyback time, like usually military time is right up there at the top of the list, and then a void check for pension payments going directly to your checking account electronically. And then another line item on the list in terms of identifying paperwork. If you have any federal employee group life insurance going into retirement, inevitably there will be a decision that takes place of, well, you've got all this FEGLI coverage, which pieces of the pie do you want to hang on to? So whether or not, if you want to hang on to basic, do you want to hang on to all of it, half of it, or a quarter of it? Do you want to hang on option A coverage? So basic is your salary rounded up to the next 1,000 plus two. Option A is just a flat $10,000. It's kind of like a burial policy. Usually the options that people don't hang on to as retirees are the multiples of salary, the option B coverage, and then option C, which is family coverage, becomes cost prohibitive as a retiree. Most of the time, people hang on to basic and option A and take what's called a 75% reduction. But there's a formal standard for SF form that you submit with retirement paperwork to give instructions on what you want to do with that FEGLI coverage as a retiree. And then inevitably, federal tax withholding will be one to take into consideration. So W4P or IRS W4P is one of the important ones on the list for paperwork for retirement too. In terms of establishing the federal tax withholding on your FERS pension payments. And this would be a snapshot of what W4P looks like. Those ones, pretty much all the SF forms and W4P you can find pretty easily with a Google search. You just type the form number into Google, it'll usually give you a link to the PDF document. Moving on to important beneficiary forms, going into formal retirement process, it's always important to just double check beneficiaries, make sure that everything's set the way that you want it to be set, and then you don't hypothetically run into any unpleasant surprises. So SF 1152 would be unpaid compensation of a deceased employee, or your final paycheck and your annual leave payment in the event that, God forbid, you pass away as an active employee. SF 2823, this would be a beneficiary designation on your federal employee group life insurance coverage. SF 2808 or SF 3102 would be the FERS designation of benefit. Or let's say you are a single person, or you and your spouse pass away together in a car accident, for instance, and you didn't get to formal retirement. There's a return of the money that you paid into the FERS pension system to somebody. So it's not the biggest or the most important form on the list of beneficiary forms, because most of the time people filled it out like new employee orientation and never worried about it ever again. But just double checking that one if you get a chance. And then nowadays, everything with TSP is done via their website. So just banking in the back of your mind that if you need to make an adjustment to your TSP beneficiaries, that's done via the TSP website. So this would be a snapshot of SF 1152, snapshot of FEGLI designation of beneficiary form, or SF 2823, CSRS pension contributions, SF 2808, and then this is a snapshot of SF 3102, the FERS retirement system contributions. And then this would be just a snapshot from the screen on TSP's website that you go to update beneficiary forms. So, like we said, everything with Thrift is done via their website these days. Alrighty, moving on to the timing of benefits. Inevitably, so like we said earlier, your final paycheck and annual leave get paid out by your agency, and then your agency shifts all of your information to the Office of Personnel Management. While you're in that interim process, inevitably you get NFC notification of separation letter. It's just heads up that you're in the process of moving from active employee with your agency to OPM retiree. Inevitably, once they have you set up in the system with the Office of Personnel Management, you'll get what's called a CSA number, which is your Civil Service Annuitant number. CSA number is a very important one to keep in a safe place, because it's your identification number with OPM as a federal retiree. Pretty much everything hinges on if you need to get identifying access to anything as a retiree with OPM, it all hinges on whatever your CSA number is. Temporary passwords mailed to you 7 to 10 business days after they send the welcome packet from OPM. And then it's always helpful. OPM has a website where you can check on where things are at in process. It's not like they don't update it on a daily basis, but periodically, once you get assigned a case manager, once they start making interim pension payments, you get a statement for that. So going to servicesonline.opm.gov is kind of like your easy access to getting periodic status updates. And then once you're on the books as a retiree with OPM, that's oftentimes when you're eligible to make some decisions on what you want to do with TSP. So generally, 59 and a half or retirement are the important timeframes for TSP withdrawals or rollovers. So this would be a snapshot. So that CSA number, when they send it to you from OPM, it comes on like a little credit card sized identifying card, which this is a snapshot of what it looks like, but it always starts with that A and then has a bunch of numbers after that. So like we said, just keeping that number in a safe place, because it's your main identification number as a federal retiree. All right, so interim pay. Inevitably, interim pay is kind of like the period of time where OPM's auditing your service history and crunching the numbers for your final pension payment. But while you're in that limbo land, they usually pay you about 60 to 80% of what your full final pension annuity is supposed to be. They'll pay you all the money that you're owed. It's just there's a window of time where like we said, they're auditing your service record and paying you a portion of what it's supposed to be, but not the full amount. That process usually takes about 60 to 90, oftentimes closer to 90 days before they finally get your full firm final pension payment out to you. And often how the duration of time it takes depends on how complex your service history is and how proactive you were with submitting all the correct identifying information prior to retirement. So you always try your best to reduce the margin for error, because the more identifying information you submit and the more making sure the I's are dotted in the right spots, T's are crossed in the right spots, just reduces any sort of hypothetical delay that might crop up. And then this slide's just a reminder that, again, it's not like you're not missing out on the money that they're supposed to be paying you. Inevitably, they'll pay you the portion that you were supposed to be getting while you're on interim pay status. But at the same time, they also deduct the FEHB premium, the health insurance premiums, any life insurance premiums, while you're also in that interim limbo land status too. So just kind of keep that one in the back of your mind. And then this was just a reminder of that My Federal Retirement Benefits book, that blue book, the book with the blue cover. Inevitable or eventually that'll have the final firm numbers on your payment amounts for each piece of your federal retirement benefits with the Office of Personnel Management. All right, so what happens to FEHB, dental, and vision at the point of it? FEHB is transferred to OPM after retirement. When you're on interim pay, no FEHB deductions are taken, and then, like we said a second ago, they'll eventually get caught up and take all the money that's owed. So just keep that one in the back of your mind. But you still have FEHB coverage while you're on interim status. So don't worry about not having any coverage while they're crunching the numbers for your retirement benefits with OPM. Factors that definitely cause extended delays in your processing time with OPM. The big one at the top of the list would be any sort of court orders or divorce decrees, court orders available for processing. You want to make sure that you submit those with more than enough lead time so that OPM can get those in on the books in your file prior. It's not, you don't want to wait until like a few days before formal retirement and then submit that information to them. So giving everyone a heads up if you have a court order available for processing where a former spouse is entitled to a portion of your pension payment is an important one at the top of the list. And then making sure you got DD-214s, receipts for buyback time, making sure your address is up to date. Sometimes people will move shortly after retirement. So if you're in that zone, just making sure that you log back into the services online website and get your address up to date as soon as possible. Additional factors that cause delays: former workers' comp claims, multiple breaks in service, or not having the correct identifying information for those breaks in service, especially if it's not reflected in your service computation date. Part-time service, FICA time, that's always an important one. Depending on when it took place, sometimes you have the option to buy that FICA time back. So, alrighty, so how do you start a retirement strategy? Our process usually three steps. First step is what we call a fact-finding meeting, where we send you a list of identifying information to gather, and the more accurate that information is, the more accurate we can be with the information that we present to you. Second meeting is where we break down decisions or choices that you have for each piece of the pie. So payment amounts for first pension, payment amounts for Social Security or for supplement, and income strategy on the money that you've been saving in TSP, decisions on what you want to do, or options on federal employee group life insurance coverage. Sometimes that starts with version 1 and morphs into version 2 or 3, depending on adjustments that people want to make. But the big one on the list with version 1, we always run a net monthly income comparison, which breaks down net monthly income from active employment and then net monthly income as a retiree, which it's an important piece of information because it breaks down any sort of income gaps that you'd be looking at relative to the timing of retirement. And then in subsequent meetings, finalizing the decisions that you've made, setting up income plans with TSP savings. It makes sense to roll that money outside of TSP. Inevitably, there's a process of opening up new accounts to receive that money, and then going forward from formal retirement, it's an ongoing process of review. Life happens, things change, have a tendency to change after you formally retire from the federal government. So the process with our clients doesn't end after you retire from the federal government. So items of identifying information. Obviously, any sort of retirement estimate. So recent copy of a leave and earnings statement is an important one because that's the one that we use to run that net monthly income comparison. A copy of any retirement estimate. So any estimates that you can get from HR, Employee Express, the GRB platform, MyPay. Copy of your FERS annual benefits report is an important one. Just a recent TSP statement so we can get an idea of balance in the funds that you're invested in. Any other investment accounts that you have earmarked for retirement income, so like 401ks, 457 plans. Detail on any life insurance policies or outside life insurance, outside long-term. Usually this one would be, sometimes people have outside term coverage, knowing how far you are into the term and just the type of coverage and how long it's going to last. Just a recent statement from Social Security is important from getting an idea of payment amounts at different ages. And each year you're paying into Social Security, the benefits constantly changing. So the more recent the statement that you can get from Social Security, the better. Any divorce decree, if that's applicable to your specific scenario. And then sometimes people inevitably want to fold in their spouse's benefits. So if that's the case, identifying information on any benefits that from your spouse that you want to include into a plan. So how about any questions, Patty?
There aren't any questions. David, do you have anything else?
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you think of a question or have a thought that we didn't talk about on the call, feel free to give me a call. You can always send me an email or go to the website and submit your question via the website. Thanks for tuning in and hope to talk to you guys soon.